Hey, welcome to another episode of the Innovation Mindset Podcast, powered by the Jim Moran College of Entrepreneurship. I am Mark McNees, your host, and today we have a special episode with the CIO of FSU, Jonathan Fozard, and we also have the account rep for FSU representing Google to talk about AI. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. And let's start with you, Jonathan. Tell us a little bit about what a chief information officer does at FSU.
I tell you what, it's the best job in the world. I get to work for one of the best universities, and my role is really all the technology across our FSU system. So it's everything from the help desk to the classroom technology to the scoreboards, the sound systems, and everything in between globally, not just here in Tallahassee, but our study centers, our museums, our branch campuses as well. So that's kind of my role here at the university.
All right, fantastic. And John Breed, what do you do at Google?
Yeah, it's not as cool a job as Jonathan's. So my job is with Google Public Sector. So it's really the Google for Government group. And specifically, I support the state of Florida, state agencies, and Florida State. So my job is to help where they want to leverage Google and how can I help them solve solutions, solve problems, provide solutions, something like that for FSU.
Oh, great. Well, I wanted to have you both in here today because I've been reading a lot of news about the partnership between FSU and Google's new AI Gemini initiative. They're dropping $1 billion. So let's start with you, Jonathan. Like, how did this all come together? I believe we're the only R1 institution in Florida that is partnering with Google on this project, and 1 in 11 nationally. So how did that come all about?
Yeah, so Mark, basically it started with kind of an idea and a concept. So we want to put AI tools and resources for all of our faculty, staff, and students. We want our campus community to be leaders in innovation, leaders in using the latest tools and technologies. So we'd actually reached out to Google and said, hey, we really think that there's an opportunity here, whether it's in our higher education space. We have 3 K through 12 kind of campuses and across our Florida State system. How can we deploy an AI tool, model, a suite of services that could really help advance our AI strategy here on campus? And that's really where it kind of started, was just a conversation around that. It grew into what you're talking about, which was, being a leader here in Florida, being one of the first few nationally, and it's obviously grown from there across Florida, across the nation. But it really was just a partnership. It was a conversation with Google about where we wanted to be and where Google wanted to be and how can we work together to achieve that.
Nice. And John, so what was Google looking for in a partnership, and why was FSU a candidate, I guess?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that Google's thinking about. So the Google education side of the house, so to speak, is very focused in on how do we help both research, so faculty, students have outcomes that are positive given the technology advances today. So what made FSU stand out is a couple of things. One, it's an R1 university. So immediately, for those who don't know, that just really means top tier research university. Mm-hmm. And FSU has a reputation for being the most efficient R1 university as well. And that, coupled with being close to the state capital of Florida, made it attractive. And then obviously, really Jonathan's team being willing to sort of have those conversations and start to talk about, how can Google have a positive impact and be part of the overarching goal for his team in FSU.
Nice. So this partnership, Google's putting a lot of money into this initiative, $1 billion, a commitment to higher education over the next 3 years, yep. I believe, which is a massive investment even for Google. So what problem would you say that Google sees that they're trying to assist universities overcome?
Yeah, I think there's probably a host of problems, or maybe problems are wrong, opportunities that Google sees. One, I think they're very interested, or as a whole, as an organization, they're very interested in equality, meaning equality for all students to have the opportunity to have the best tools particularly cutting edge AI tools, right? We see that as a core advantage for education, for the U.S., for for students that that are going to lead in the future. So I think a lot of that is around the equality of of access to the right tools, and secondarily, I think there's there's a little bit of guardrails around making sure that Google has an opportunity to help influence sort of the policy pieces around how AI is used for good in education. I think those are big parts of that investment. And, obviously Google is not is a for-profit organization. So certainly we also want to be part of the future of education and have the opportunity to be partners with top-tier universities. So I think that's a lot of it. But I think that equality piece is super interesting to Google, is to make sure that everyone has access to leading edge tools, right? That's really a big push of ours.
All right, nice, thanks. That clears that up quite a bit. So, Jonathan, I read that. So this is quoting you, that you mentioned that Google recognizes the forward-thinking work being done at Florida State. So could you paint a picture for us, like as for research faculty, for teaching faculty, and for students? Like, what are you envisioning this initiative doing that will help in those areas?
I think it all starts with the vision that really our president and provost have, right? Our president is an innovator. That's his nature. He actually is a faculty researcher himself, and he's developed material science applications and things in the chemistry area. So when you have leadership that comes in with that lens, it's how can you speed that up? How can we make discoveries faster? How can we help teaching and learning and student success more? There's an announcement that just came out this week about 99.2% retention rate from a freshman that starts in the fall to a freshman that goes in the spring. How can we get that to 99.3, 99.4, 99.5? You're getting into these research endeavors, these teaching and learning, this retention, where you have to have technologies that can assist us 24/7. Our researchers are top class, world renowned, right? But they have to sleep at some point.
Right.
How can we partner with technology to be able to advance their research, their work, their effort to where we have that innovation happening faster, we have that data analytics happening quicker, and we have better results to make data-driven decisions? And I think that's where it kind of started, and that's where we see these tools helping inside and outside the classroom, inside and outside our research labs. And really even administratively, how can we look at like what we're doing and how could we save money? That's how we're leveraging these types of tools.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. So obviously there's a lot of concern about security around AI and things like that, especially for researchers who are working on IP and things like that. So Jonathan, can we start with you, and what's been the thought process on how to protect our students and our researchers? And then I'm going to flip over to you, John, and just want to hear about like how Google thinks about that.
Yeah. We actually started with a framework of, we already had policies to protect our data at Florida State University. And these policies went all the way up through the president's cabinet. They're established on the website. They've been here for a while. What we really worked with faculty and researchers in our administration on was how do we build guidelines? So we launched ai.fsu.edu as kind of a go-to resource. And part of that resource is like trying to protect our data. How do we protect our privacy? How do you use AI in ethical ways? And we freely talk about that. We freely give that to other universities as kind of like a model that they can use, that they can replicate and use within their own, faculty senate or faculty technology subcommittees to kind of do a starter point. For us, one of the reasons why whenever you go to that ai.fsu website, you don't see all AI tools listed is because it starts with, we want protections in place. And so Google was one of the companies that came to us and said, we care about your intellectual property. We care about your privacy. We care about your data protection. And so for us, what we did is we worked with them to establish that relationship, to sign those agreements, to make sure that our data was protected, especially that intellectual property, those research endeavors that can't be shared right now because of how sensitive that data is. We worked with Google to make sure that there was protections in place for it. And so when you go to that website, you'll actually see those tools that we have on that website are only there because they've gone through that stringent review process, they meet our data policies and procedures.
Fantastic. John?
Yeah, so I honestly, working with Jonathan, it's super easy, and he's hit a lot of the same points. So data sovereignty is a massive issue, particularly around anything that is, you know, a public university or a public entity that serves constituents and citizens, right? So part of that, when I was explaining on the front end that I'm part of Google for government, that is a unique role inside Google to protect data and provide ethical AI solutions. So one of the reasons that I took this role, and frankly, Mark knows this and Jonathan knows this, one of the reasons I took this role after leaving FSU as a faculty member is that commitment to ethical AI and ethical data protection. So part of what we were able to work with Jonathan, and I think we see this at Stanford and MIT and some of the other R1 universities we're doing this work around, is that idea of sort of owning the tech stack so that data is protected. Google's one of the few that actually makes chips and kind of owns all the way up the AI stack. I think that's a core advantage for, again, for public sector type clients, that data piece is super important, whether it's, you know, private information or CGIS kind of pieces or FedRAMP High, and now we're down to some kind of techie cyber terms. But what that really says is that we're meeting the standards or exceeding the standards that really institutions like FSU need to have, right? We want those kind of outcomes, you know, for FSU. We want you to be creative. We get really excited about the idea of participating in research and how maybe AI can speed that up and bring better outcomes for citizens. But if we don't protect that data correctly, right, there's significant downsides for that.
And Mark, I think, you know, what John's saying too, it brings up a good point. It's not just one type of data, right? It could be a medical research endeavor. Correct. It could be, you know, that sensitive governmental research that we're doing, or it could just be, you know, student information and grade information. All of that needs to be protected in different ways. And I think that agreement really makes sense.
Yeah, I'll even take that, you know, one step further when we start to talk about data. I mean, think a lot about like, you know, Mark, when you're building classes for FSU and Canvas and you've got multiple data sources, right? You might be using PDFs, you might be using different web links that are outside pieces. Where I think we're going to see, and not just Google, I think you're going to see this with many of the AI companies, is that ability to take sort of unstructured data and still be able to draw insights from it, really get outcomes from it, but also protect it, and then making sure that you're not releasing sensitive things. You're not releasing a student's name or, you know, some of those kind of things. And I think, you know, Jonathan's team takes that very seriously. I think not just Google. I would suggest that the big AI firms in the U.S. all think that way. But I think that's what has to happen from how we serve citizens and students and faculty.
Okay, great. Jonathan, you mentioned something that I didn't really think about, just compliance on FERPA, I think, and HIPAA and compliance and things like that. It's a lot of moving parts. How have you led your team to make sure that we're compliant in those areas?
Well, I go back to Florida State has the best resources and the best people working here, right? And so we have a team that really follows a lot of that, because those rules can change on a quick basis. Like you could turn and all of a sudden it's changed. The federal space could change a guidance or a guideline quickly. So what we do is we obviously try to keep up with that. We have, you know, teams that look at that, the legislative affairs teams, we have security teams that look at that, but then we also partner. And so Google would be a partner in that, where we're having those conversations with our key campus partners like a Google. Hey, what are you hearing? What are we hearing? You know, is this covered? And then we obviously do our due diligence on both ends, right, to make sure that we're doing that data protection. So,
yeah, awesome. And I want to talk a little bit about the implementation strategy. FSU obviously is a huge community. I mean, it's basically a city, and you have lots of different stakeholders and things like this. And I'd actually like both of you to speak into the adoption rate, especially John. You have a unique perspective because you were a faculty member at JMC and business college before that, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So you have quite a bit of experience with that and just the rollout, because I've seen the announcements, but I'm going to kind of like be the voice of people on the front line. Like, we get a lot of stuff thrown at us, right? And it's hard to disseminate through like, okay, is this something for me? Is this not something for me? The other thing that I think is muddying the waters is on the front lines. What I'm seeing is students are confused and about the AI policy. Some of them are petrified to use AI because they don't want to get popped for plagiarism. I know that there's faculty members who have gone to handwritten tests and stuff like that to ensure that students aren't using an AI. And then I would say in my classes on the other side, I give extra credit if they use AI in a creative way.
That's great.
That's
And
awesome.
I tell them to use it however they want to use it, just disclose it.
Yeah.
And if you teach me something, I'll give you extra credit. So obviously, there's a wide divergence of faculty and students of how we're viewing this. And as the leader of this, Jonathan, could you clear it up a little bit for us?
Yeah,
Fix it.
Good
Well,
luck.
yeah, fix it. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a loaded question. But I think it starts with, we want to meet faculty and researchers where they're at and students where they're at. And so I think we got to start there with the baseline. So our Office of Digital Learning really worked with faculty to say there isn't a requirement that you have to use AI in your classrooms, because for some classes that's just a non-starter, right? You may be an English instructor and you're really trying to teach some syntax or something around sentence structure that you don't want AI just to automate for them, right? Like, hey, we really want you to dive into this. Or you might be in a marketing class and you're like, we want to see your creativity, maybe not the creativity of the AI agent, right? And so I think that, there's those unique classes where faculty have to make that decision. And I think it comes to communication, whether it's a student, a faculty, a staff person. What are the guidelines? So you mentioned a great example. If you're a faculty member and you encourage it, stating that up front, not just in your syllabus, but during class is so important for students understanding that clarity. And then likewise, from an IT department standpoint, what we're trying to do is we want people to have a freedom of choice. The ability that if you want to dive into AI tools, go to ai.fsu.edu, download, use, log into all you want, all you can eat, right? We want you to have that access. But if you don't want to do it, we want you also to have the freedom and the ability to kind of take a step back and say, you know what, for what I'm teaching, what I'm researching, I don't need that right now. We want to do the balance. And I think, whenever you say, I don't know that there's a single solution for that.
No, I don't think there is. I think I really love your kind of comment is when I'm thinking about a syllabus and how you're going to set up a course of setting that sort of bedrock of here's how we're going to leverage AI or not. I get really interested, and I think that probably speaks a little bit to that Google investment around AI and education. Is the reality is that these students are going to enter a world where AI is prevalent. And so I think about student outcomes a lot. There's certainly another piece of the pie around research and how we approach that. And given how AI changes research in general and publishing and peer review. But I think when you're talking about student outcomes, if we're not allowing them, in my view, if I were teaching the classes that I taught for 11 years, I would probably be in alignment with you, Mark, that I would want students to use it. I think you would want them to use it in a way that isn't shortcutting the process, but producing better outcomes. Because I think, we just saw, some announcements. We're literally 1,000 days. I believe that's right. Somewhere roughly around 1,000 days of ChatGPT sort of exploding as a consumer product.
It's absolutely
right?
insane.
And so we're still way out in front. So I think unpacking that question for Jonathan, we just don't quite know. But what does make sense to me is giving students, faculty, and staff access to tools that, from a security standpoint, that their data is protected, that someone in the leadership of the university has had a chance to sort of vet, making sure that there's those right agreements. But you've got to meet students where they are. They're using these products. I mean, the adoption rate of ChatGPT is amazing. We already know on the enterprise side. So when you're out in the business side, or if you're an entrepreneur, or really any profession at this point, I think AI tools are pretty prevalent. How they're going to use it, I would still argue. I'm inside an AI company, and it's pretty interesting to listen to how different people use it inside Google. I'm a pro that it's just a technology. This is no different than go back 10 years ago, and I think I taught the first mobile app development class on campus. And there was a lot of talk about why would you do that? And it's like, well, it's more the business model. You need to understand why this is different,
Right.
and how it's going to impact the future. And then how, honestly, if I was using visuals, I would use a phone, of how crucial that's become. We're going to see the same thing with AI that we see in smartphones. I mean, it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, kind of the culture that, me personally, my opinion, in my class.
But I say that, and don't mean to speak over you, going back to Jonathan's point, it may or may not be exactly right for a given coursework, meaning potentially some foundational courses.
Some people don't need it, yeah.
And then I think when you start to think about supporting outcomes for students, and maybe I look at that as an economic lens at times around jobs and innovation and production, that's where I get really interested in it. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you, Mark.
No, that's fine. I was just thinking about the ethics of it and kind of the struggle, because students have been so pushed on plagiarism, right? And a lot of times this feels like plagiarism for them when they're using it. And so it's been interesting. And I've tried to say, hey, use it however you want, but disclose it, and we're going to figure this out. And I'm not going to if you kind of cross the line and it seems unethical, we'll talk about it.
Right.
We just don't know yet. It hasn't been around long enough.
But Mark, I think you're bringing up a good point, because we see that in the public space on the news media and stuff about lawyers that do their whole briefing through AI and never read it, right? And then turn it in as their own work. And I think if I were a student going through college again, I think, have to disclose it, have to make sure that the faculty member or your instructor is clear about their instructions for it. But is it your own work? If you're using it to generate ideas and then you take that and you springboard into an essay and you're writing your own essay, I think that's a great use of AI. Yeah. But if all you did is write me a 500-page paper, that's pure plagiarism, no different than, way back when I'd say, hey, John, could you go ahead and write my paper for me?
Yeah, it's not that far
that
off.
would be plagiarism, right? And so we think of it I think our students, especially those high schoolers that are coming up into college, our students that are in college, they're not thinking about it, AI, in that same thing as hey, it's like a John sitting by you. Right. If you tell John, write my paper for me because it's due tomorrow, that's plagiarism. So too in AI.
Yeah. I look at AI, for me, I mean, just even with the podcast, I'm able to do stuff with this podcast that has 10x'd our views because of AI.
Correct.
And I don't have time to do it. I could do it, but I'm not going to spend 30 hours to do it, and AI can do it. Yeah. So one thing that I was like, hey, what's the purpose of this assignment? Or what are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to accomplish me spending hours pulling little clips out of an hour podcast? Is that my goal? No, my goal is to get quality content out, and AI can do it very well.
Yeah. I think that's the use cases that we have to advocate for. We have to continue to demonstrate for everyone, right, at all levels. And people who have never used AI, how can we show them how this could actually help enable those kind of situations, could make businesses grow, could help expand access for people.
Yeah, I would go even, I agree with both of you consistently across the board. Super interested in sort of the buzzy piece of really having that mentor, that assistant, right? And the assistant just immediately implies you're still doing a lot of the creative generation, and then you're using those tools to sort of fine tune, potentially, to your point, Mark, better communicate out messaging that could potentially reach more people. There's just a whole lot here that's super interesting from an AI perspective. Further, I just think that what we're going to figure out is again, I use a lot of analogies of old technology. It is different, but it's not that different. And I think what we're going to figure out is, Mark, you and I have had this conversation before. The first time I was in an entrepreneurship class and someone walked in and said they were going to be an influencer. And I was like, I don't think that's a job. I'm not exactly, I'm excited for you, but I think you may starve.
Yeah. Fast forward to today, right? Yeah.
And then you fast forward today with social media and how prevalent it is. And then in actuality, such a line of communication for folks that's a legitimate career. You can go inside organizations like Google, and they have folks who are paid to do this. And oh, by the way, AI helps them a lot too. I think that we're going to wake up and it's just going to be a very different set of skills needed and what those outcomes are. So, for folks who tune in to podcasts like this, I know we're speaking to the greater FSU, student body and stakeholders, but a lot of them are entrepreneurs. I find it just fascinating if we can, and I think FSU is doing a great job of opening up those tools for entrepreneurs to allow them to either accelerate business models they're after or rethink them or validate or test. I mean, the opportunities around that are amazing. And the same thing applies on the research side, right? And when we're talking huge data sets, you're just really changing the productivity game. It doesn't dehumanize it. Yeah. It in theory, it should enhance it and force multiply it, right?
I mean, think about our rare pediatric disease effort that we have here in Florida, and it's here at Florida State. Like, we're looking at AI to help solve challenges that researchers have been stumped by, not because they don't care about it, not that they're not passionate or they're best in the world. It's because that data analysis, and if you can add AI alongside them and add agentic agents to help them, maybe we can solve some rare pediatric diseases that have never been able to be figured out ever before.
Yeah,
it's that kind of mindset.
No, I think that's the part that's exciting, and I suspect that even today, and Jonathan, you and I have had some of these conversations. You can probably put people, to simplify in buckets, right, of like where they are on that AI journey, and that AI journey matters because going back to meeting students and faculty and staff where they're at. Is some need training, right? Some need an idea about how to ethically use it, maybe frame that up for them so they understand that. Some are going to be out on the outer edge, and they're to your point, I love the idea that you give extra credit for folks that teach you something and you actually teach on this.
I get in arguments like students are like, why didn't I get extra credit? I'm like, everybody knows how to do that with AI. And they're like, no, it's really new. I'm like, no, generating a picture by AI is not new. You're not getting
You're not going to nano banana. Banana. We all know that. No, I think that's kind of a third who don't know yet. And that can be staff, faculty, students. There has to be some opportunities to sort of upskill them. And that's part of that AI investment that Google wants to make in education. But then there's the sort of middle third, if so to speak, and it's probably less a third, but kind of buckets of folks who are interested, using it a little bit, but maybe don't know how to maximize their talents and their abilities leveraging AI. And then you've got that bleeding sort of what's the fun buzzy term around that, the jagged edge, so to speak, of AI. That I think what FSU is doing is allowing that all you can eat sort of approach to it. And giving people those guardrails. And then I think you're already seeing it at FSU. You guys are doing a great job of trying to train researchers. And I know that it's hard for faculty because they get 1,000 emails a day from students and different initiatives, but it's super crucial.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The importance of AI in education really came clear actually last week. I had the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar media company staying with me, and we were talking about AI and just the differences that I've seen in their programming and things like that. And he was telling me the way that he evaluates employees over the past 2 years has totally changed. Now, the number one thing is, how are you using AI to make our programming better?
Right.
And I thought that was like really interesting. And I mean, this is a huge company that everybody knows. So it's just, it's pretty.
That's great.
Yeah, at the risk of being the one asking the questions when that's your job a little bit, how has it changed sort of your team and how they think about it? Because I know, to your point, Mark, I think that's very much a sort of Google, and I'm sure that's an Anthropic question. That's those employees, and frankly, I think that's now going out. It's such an enterprise solution at this point. You have to demonstrate a command of AI. I think at this point to really lead teams, to impact outcomes, those kind of things. I'd be curious how it sort of changes. How you guys think about your team and what they're trying to do and their skill set a little bit.
Yeah, I think it shifts, right?
Because you got that techie thing.
Yeah,
like you and I live in that techie world.
Yeah, we live in the
techie
techie world.
Yeah.
I think it shifts. We used to want to upskill and train to write a bunch of code. That's kind of something as we kind of go forward, that the understanding of code is very important.
Yeah.
But now we can automate some of that development work, and I think it's shifting the training module, shifting our our success metrics, kind of similar to what you were talking about where we see our organization in the next, 24 months, 36 months. It's really hard to envision 3 years from now with how fast technology is moving. But I do think, the horizon is like some of these skills, we don't need to upskill. We actually need to transition into AI skilling.
Yeah. I read, and you can correct me if this is incorrect, but I read that AI's capacity is doubling every 7 months. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, we used to be so worried about we were slowing down on the exponential curve. That is, that was a couple of years ago. We were talking about that, right? And
the chips can't keep up.
Yeah, the chips can't keep up, and those kind of things. That clearly is not the issue with AI. Yeah, I also think that, speaking of coding's the easy one to sort of pick on a little bit. You're already seeing what is some of the recent stuff coming out of Meta that, more than 80% of their code now is AI driven. It is not seemingly impacting the number of coders getting hired, which will tell you really it's going to be a multiplying effect, right? And so, I've listened to a lot of people on infrastructure, big technical projects. To your point, I think it's changing. We used to want to upskill, and now it's like, no. Like, we can upskill and have positive outcomes at the same time with AI is fascinating to me. I think the play on education is going to be super interesting. I actually think for as much as AI disrupts education and some of those things that you're talking about, a worry of plagiarism or the student's not going to be creative enough, I would kind of suggest the opposite. I think where AI probably has the most negative impact in enterprises today. This is a John Breed statement, not a Google statement. So let me make sure I put an asterisk on this. And I know this is something that's near and dear to your heart, is the intern, right? Like, a lot of what you would do with interns and entry level positions in organizations, AI does that stuff really quite well, right? Which to me says that over time, that's going to evolve a bit, what that role is in internship. I think that puts a whole lot more emphasis on higher education and maybe trade school education and sort of those structures in the U.S. education system to stand in for that. Like, students are going to lose. I have a theory that I think that a thesis that would suggest that we're going to be more important in higher education to help those students bridge some of those gaps that maybe the enterprise is going to move past because some of those roles are going to be very automated out. So that importance of higher education around teaching technicals, sort of how to use technical tools to still solve problems. I think that's actually going to get more important. My thesis is that those skills that you're doing in the classroom that FSU is enabling actually are going to get more important, not less, with the technology. Those people skills are going to get a whole lot more important.
Exponential learning too. So whenever we talk about like the student interns, we used to hire student interns and we wanted them to come in and code, or we wanted them to come in and design. Now we're trying to, we want them to come in and problem solve.
Interesting.
We had 150 this semester, Mark, just alone in IT. So we had
that's amazing.
It is a lot.
We should tout that more.
Yeah,
that's
so
an amazing
150 student interns on this campus, and we're not using them to grab coffee. We're not using them to make copies, and we're not using them for those basic skill sets. What we're using them for is we want to put you alongside our team. We want you to innovate. We want you to problem solve. We want you to learn not just inside the classroom, but outside the classroom. How can you use these tools to problem solve? How can you use this technology to solve something that used to be unsolvable? That's what we want our student interns doing.
Yeah, going back to the coding thing, like, we used to tell kids, learn to code. And
you and I've had that debate 100 times.
Yeah, well, right? In the early 90s, I had a HTML for Dummies book, and I wrote my first website and everything. And you don't even know this, John, but I recently accepted an assistant beach volleyball coaching job at Leon High School to help the girls out and everything. And they were using an Excel spreadsheet to track the girls' stats and everything. So I jumped on, unfortunately, one of your competitors, John, and I just said,
change that.
And I said, hey,
we'll talk later.
I want to know. I want you to create a database that tracks all the girls' skills, what their strengths are, and give potential pairings and things like that. And it pumped out this website. I just dumped it onto the web, and I gave it to the coach, and she's like, I didn't know you could code and do all this. I'm like, I have no idea. I just told it what I wanted it to do, and it did it incredibly.
Well, I would take it even a step further. And again, Jonathan and I live in a techie world, so I'll try to not go too deep down that rabbit hole. But I do think the AI, kind of the 1,000 days in of consumer AI, right? It's been adopted so much that now sort of the wow factor is a little bit off, right? And so then I think the challenge is it's a tool set, right? I mean, Agentic really means it's a tool set of different AI models leveraging to get to a task that can do some autonomous stuff. But the reality is, it's still a tool set. So to your point, I actually think the education piece, if I were teaching an entrepreneurship class today on startups, I'm with you. I would be wanting the students to leverage that because it's a force multiplier for them. And then more importantly, you would spend all kinds of times with entrepreneurs, students who are like, but if I just knew how to code to produce that app, and we would try to introduce them to low code platforms, sort of some simple ways, but that still took a level of, just the outcomes of those weren't perfect. You could build a nice MVP. Today, through vibe coding, man, whether that's Anthropic or any number of the models, you can legitimately build something that someone's going to look at who doesn't know AI and go, holy cow, I didn't know you could build websites.
I was shocked how good it came out.
Like 80% of databases now are being built, of the leading edge databases are heading towards automation. Like, it's pretty wild.
And you see this though, this is an evolution, right?
Yeah.
Because remember, you just brought up a thing. You coded from a book. Then all of a sudden we moved to the low code, no code, right? You could drag and drop, right? You go to the website, you can drag and drop and all that. Now
the
we're
Squarespace Wix sort of approach.
Now we're doing prompt engineering. And to code, you just need to have a really good prompt to be really clear on what you're trying to get, and then you can copy and paste. So it's not, I think where people are losing maybe vision cast is this is an evolution of where the technology is headed, and it's a tool.
And also, I mean, again, my job that particular job is to teach young girls how to play volleyball. My job is not to code a website, right? So, but AI allowed me to create a tool
to better coach,
to better outcomes. Yeah, and to give the girls better information. Like, this is areas that you're weak, or you could use a little stronger, time in and stuff like that. So I want to switch gears really quick to some practical stuff. One Google product that I'm just fascinated with, and I want to hear about, Jonathan, what you think about it and what the future of it is. And I don't think a lot of people talk about it, is NotebookLM. Every time I experience, I'm like, why aren't I using this all the time? And it does so much more than I even use it for. So tell us a little bit about NotebookLM, and is this part of the a part of our project that we're doing at FSU?
Yeah, I'll lead that off, and then we can go to that. Yeah, so maybe this is the one that has a little bit of an asterisk for me at the moment.
Okay.
I also think that of the code on Claude blows me away, where there's still some magic that you see occasionally, and you go, holy cow, even for us, the three of us who use AI tools probably daily, NotebookLM is the one that's like my favorite. So not to be a complete Google shill here, but I'll go down the pathway. What makes NotebookLM really interesting to me is, one, as opposed to just allowing a large language model to go out in public and sort of be the smartest assistant you've ever had that can, parse all kinds of data on the web, public data. Now we're talking about being able to control what data sets it looks at. So we can upload very specific things. That in itself is a super important point. Now that's becoming more and more common in some of the other models, but NotebookLM is kind of built on that. Point me in a certain direction, give me the data sets. Think in terms of teaching. What's probably an aha moment from a faculty perspective is the ability to upload sort of all your lectures, all your PowerPoint slides, all, any sort of outside sources, load that in, and then allow it to, even potentially if you're doing any sort of voice work or recordings on Zoom or however you're doing that in Canvas with an online class, allow that to literally summarize and then build out visuals for it, presentations. The one that kind of awed people, if you haven't played with it, anybody listening to this podcast, it will make a podcast on any subject you like. So that visual piece, the quizzing piece, there's so many interesting outcomes from NotebookLM that it still goes back to that meeting students where they are. If they're visual learners, it can create incredible visuals. If they're, in flowcharts and work that through. If you're like me, who likes to listen to a lot of podcasts, and I learn a lot by listening, it has a great mechanism for summarizing that.
It really does.
And then certainly getting very precise on what you want it to do, so you don't have those, hey, I'm asking it to break down different models of bikes, and you're actually thinking mountain bikes, and it's going down a pathway of electric bikes, right? And you can be very specific with it. I think it's just an incredibly powerful tool. I'll put words in Jonathan's mouth. I think when we first started having these conversations, when I joined the conversations with FSU and Google, you said at the time NotebookLM was like the second most popular sort of LLM or AI project. I bet that was more on the student side, not the faculty side.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of faculty don't know what NotebookLM does. And it might be the most powerful tool on the teaching side, just at least today.
It's insanely good.
It is.
I think the teaching and learning side, right? Because one of the things, whenever you talk about the students, we had students who actually have given us quotes and been on video with us in IT saying like, look, I used only NotebookLM to prepare based upon my notes that they had taken in class, based upon my even handwritten stuff, and kind of put the notes in there and had the podcast and listened to it and did the flashcards and the study session. And I got an A on my exam, my midterm exam. That's the only tool I used to prep and study. And it was all my material, but I used NotebookLM to bring about some of the things from my own notes that I may have overlooked on my own. I think NotebookLM is so powerful for teaching and learning. I think it's that learning piece.
Agreed.
I use it when I have to consume a lot of information.
Me too.
I use it. I put it up there. I upload my PDFs, or I upload complicated a lot of material, and I want to listen to it on my drive to and from work instead of the radio. That's my new kind of learning time, is I can do it safely. I can listen to the podcast and learn. And so when I'm not listening to Mark's podcast, obviously I'll listen to something else. But Mark's podcast first, and then I'll go.
Well, I swear it's my great joke on NotebookLM, if you haven't played with it, is whenever you're feeling really down about yourself, point it to your LinkedIn profile and a couple of things that you've done.
You're fantastic.
And then listen to the podcast about how great you are.
How great you are.
It is. It's like a therapist. Like,
You would do that.
Of course I would do that. If you didn't think I've done that, I have.
Mark, it is included. That was one of your questions. Is it included? It's included here at Florida State University. So every faculty, staff, and student does get access to this, gets unlimited use of it. They can go in and use it at any time. For however they want to use it. So I know that was part of your question too, but I know John's probably going to do that again on the drive home, is to put all 100%. Of his LinkedIn in there.
What was that old Saturday Night Live skit? Marty, the guy was like, you know what I'm
can
talking about?
You're smart enough.
You're
smart
enough.
You're,
by God, you're good enough.
My favorite episode was when he had
NotebookLM.
Michael Jordan on, and he's like, do you ever feel like inadequate and you shouldn't be out there? He's like, no. So good. So I'd like to switch to kind of just practical application if we could. So Jonathan, like what are some quick wins that you think are on the horizon?
Just in general around the AI topic,
right?
And everything.
Yeah.
I think this year is going to be the year that we finally see a lot of the automation come to fruition. I think that what we've seen, the first 1,000 days. I know that John's kind of keep referencing. I think we've seen the hype cycle begin to kind of peak, and that's more the generative AI. So when we think about, hey, write me an email, hey, update this document, hey, review this for grammatical errors, that's the hype cycle that I think we've hit. I think agentic AI in this year and next year is where we're going to start seeing the automation, the actual team of virtual workers that assist us in the work that we're doing and make our lives better. I think that's what I see kind of on the horizon. And I really see it this year and really into next year. I see that getting seamlessly integrated into services and things that we were talking about before, like 100%. Things that we use every day, shopping, all that kind of stuff. I think we're going to see agentic agents just slide in there, and we're not even going to notice it except how great it is an experience.
Yeah, 100%. I think we've been talking about that for probably a year, and I say we, I mean collectively in the
whole
AI
industry.
I think we're almost there where it gets to be so easy where, those agentic workflows and again, kind of going back to agentic is really giving the large language, the AI models to go out and do things on your behalf. So think of like, as opposed to just writing that email, it goes and does research and around. So I know Jonathan's played with it a little bit. It's one of the things that if you're inside Google or inside an organization that runs Google, it's like called Google for Enterprise. And what that does is it like personifies you, and it has, with checks and balances, and as you allow it to, it can then go read all your emails, see your calendar, see all those kind of things, and start to kind of tell you the next best thing to do and get rid of some of that. That is so easy now. Like,
I just implemented that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's
I'm like,
easy.
I said, I gave it access to my Gmail, and I said, show me what I missed.
Absolutely.
And it's like, you need to do this. And I was like, and again, this is the way I look at AI. It's producing better outcomes, right? That's the way I think of AI in its best kind of light is, this is a tool that helps me produce better outcomes. If I had the time, I could do it, but I have now this administrative assistant who never sleeps, and can tell me like, hey, your dean sent you this message 3 days ago and you haven't responded.
Your dean just said exactly that to me as I walked in. How do you want me to email you?
Yeah, exactly. So I want to talk about just looking ahead, what we're looking at, and it's a 3-year agreement. Is that correct?
So it's a multi-year agreement.
Okay.
And I, the partnership is a multi-year agreement. It's not just a 1-year agreement. It's really a foundational bedrock for us to build a platform beyond just this current offering, but even new offerings that are on the horizon where we can work with Google. We can pilot some of that. And again, you said, we are we're really a large city, right?
Yeah.
We're a city. We're not just a campus. And that, it allows Google kind of an ability to partner with us, not just this year, but in years ahead.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think the cool part about being part of that bedrock, and we're not the only ones, and FSU is going to be very, I think you guys are going to be very smart about partnering with all the right resources. Again, making sure that faculty, staff, and students have the best resources. What I think is interesting and is this idea, I think, that how students, faculty, and staff can start to bring use cases forward. So, I think, Jonathan, your team, super talented, is asking faculty, bring us use cases of how you can use it and see if there's ways we can support that. I think on our end, for folks like a Google or a Microsoft or an AWS, we're looking for, kind of use cases where we can lean in and have huge impact. So, whether that's high-end compute for research or, oh my gosh, how do we do this thing that allows for more efficient, staff work, which we haven't really touched on a ton. But all those kind of things, those bringing forth the use cases, a little bit the same language of outcomes, right? Like, stop thinking about the technology and start thinking about the outcomes and how it helps you. And then more importantly, what are those future use cases? Because I don't even think we're quite there yet. I'm not convinced that the use cases we talk about today, I think, are going to be vastly different 24 months from now.
Oh,
right?
I agree. 100%.
Yeah,
So I want to talk a little bit about just measuring success and specifically feedback loops. John, and if you can't speak to this, that's fine. But I'm just wondering, when Google is kind of looking at these 11 universities, are you looking at it as one big feedback loop, and you're working with Stanford? If Stanford learns something, or if FSU learns something, are we a cohort, or are we isolated? What's the feedback loop, and how are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me try to unpack that really quickly. And again, I think let's mix and match some of the things that Google's doing, and then what I see. So sort of interpreting from where I sit in the state of Florida, working with Google and working with great partners like FSU. A couple of things. So one thing, I think what you're starting to see, and I think, Jonathan, you'll hear a lot more from us on this, is I do think you're going to see companies like Google leaning in and putting, which sounds almost counterintuitive in AI, putting experts on the ground in the campus to support adoption and help around some of those use cases. That does a couple of things, Mark. One, it drives adoption. Two, it's that communication that we talk about, so that if policies change, if something changes from a government perspective, that you've got a resource there to help with. And then lastly, I think that also improves the quality really of those outcomes. So you've kind of got that human in the middle. I think we're going to hear a lot more about that. That's not a new term, but I think as things get more automated in an agentic way, that's going to matter. Lastly, I think what Google sees in terms of that cohort idea, there's a lot of talk around that. I'm not sure. I think we're still learning that process, to be honest. You and I've had those conversations before. I have to reach out to sometimes the MIT team or the Stanford team. And I was just in Chicago with those teams going, okay, so what are you all doing? What works, right? And I think Google's trying to formalize some of that. And I would assume the companies that are also in this space are doing the same things that we're doing, where it's like, hey, let's compare and contrast the results, the adoption rates, what succeeds, what doesn't. Co-scientists is like this super interesting thing, which is kind of like, if we talk about student having kind of this mentor agent, now you're starting to see a big push is around how do you do that at high-end research level?
All right. Thanks for that, John. So, Jonathan, from FSU side, looking down the road, just benchmarks for success. When you guys sit down, say 6 months or a year from now, what are you going to be looking at and say, did we achieve X?
Yeah, I think it starts with measurable outcomes, right? And so we've hosted things like Google Day on campus, which was like an AI training day. And we surveyed faculty and students before they went into training and after they went out of training. And did they learn something? Were they exposed to something new? Did they know how to use the tools? And we saw 80 to 90% learn something new on those kind of events that they didn't even know that they could do or that they had access to do. So I think that's number one is can we define those metrics? Can we make sure that those metrics are increasing, not decreasing? I think another aspect is, are we creating new knowledge? Are we speeding up research? Are we speeding up our time to creativity and innovation and discovery? That's another key component to our kind of our pillars of success that we've laid out with our kind of AI strategy and AI framework.
All right, nice. John?
Yeah, I'll echo a little bit of Jonathan's point. I mean, I think first and foremost is adoption, right? And that is a key around, are we getting the word out to students, faculty? Are they learning how to use the tools? Are they getting positive outcomes? Are we seeing sort of that growth, right, of usage? I think what's going to be super interesting, and I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think this is where it's heading. We're piloting a program here in the state that's very, very specific to this, is I think at some point we're going to get to that point of being able to show outcomes where research and new ways of teaching are going to come out. And then the next step is starting to test the quality of that. So I'll give you a little bit of an example without sharing who the state agency is, but they have a group of researchers and we're piloting AI, around that research piece. And what they're asking for is not to be more productive. The goal of that one's interesting. The goal of that is really around the quality of research. They want to be able to use AI, speed up their research, and then run it back through an AI solution that tests the quality. Like, are they actually bringing forth unique and productive insights? I think that will be the next phase, right? Once you kind of get past that adoption piece, then that sort of quality piece and secret sauce on that is you're really applying multiple different language models to sort of help summarize on the front end and sort of help craft the message, and then coming back and testing the thesis. Yeah. And oh, by the way, those aren't all Google models. That's leveraging multiple large language models. So I think we'll see that as sort of that next phase of how you test is this good? Is it working? Is it helping? Yeah. Right?
Okay, great. Well, I wanted to finish the podcast just asking you both for a call to action from just what do you want us, the faculty, the students, the researchers, what's important now? What's the win?
I think for me, it's a simple message. I do this whenever I go, like, meet in a department, I meet in a lab with faculty, or I meet with students. I have an SGA lunch with the CIO coming up that I love to just meet with the students and do. It's get started. get started. Just get started. Use NotebookLM, for example, and listen to, if it's your own research, it's protected, upload it, and listen to the podcast about how awesome you are with your own research, right? Like he does it with LinkedIn, do it with your research.
Absolutely.
If you're a student, upload your notes and listen to how great you were at note-taking and how it can help you study for an exam or how it can build questions. So I think get started is my number one rallying cry.
Right.
The other thing that I do, fail forward. Just, don't be afraid to use the tool. If you have no experience with it, just get in and try it. Nobody's judging you at Florida State University. If you have no knowledge, we'll help you get up to speed. But if you don't, fail forward. Try it out. Take it for a test drive. If you crash it, it's electronic. It'll reset whenever you log in again.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. John, what's your call to action?
Yeah, I think Jonathan did a great job on that. I would argue, use it, try it. I mean, the beauty of a higher education system and being within the four walls of FSU, so to speak, you kind of can't mess it up. I mean, you got to get out there and try it, play with it a little bit. I think that's a great call to action. Secondarily, I think don't be afraid, particularly on a faculty member side, to bring use cases. Jonathan's team's, got a great set of resources where they can look at things and say, hey, maybe we can enable that and make that even better. And then the call to action from a student perspective is, I think, have those conversations with faculty as to what's appropriate for that class, what the outcome of the assignment is, and having greater clarity around that from a student perspective, I think will allow them to leverage AI tools and really get more learning out of it. I mean, that would be the call to action. And then probably the very last piece there is just recognize that these things are going to change. And I think FSU is going to continue to invest in those kind of tools for everybody. So pay attention to the website, read your emails, maybe use your Agentic AI to summarize what emails are important, like 100%. The new AI tools. Yeah. But no, it's cool. It's going to be a good time.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. I really appreciate it. I know that you are both extremely busy, and I appreciate you taking an hour just to talk about this exciting initiative.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to another amazing episode of the Innovation Mindset podcast powered by the Jim Moran College of Entrepreneurship. So, hey, if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another amazing episode. We'll catch you next time.